It was one of those rare, peaceful evenings when the air was crisp, the sky clear, and the breeze off the Sea of Galilee brought a coolness to the gathering. Jesus and his disciples sat together in the shade of a group of olive trees, the ground beneath them soft with grass. A soft light from the setting sun painted the sky in hues of pink, orange, and gold. They had been traveling for many days, their bodies tired, but it wasn't just physical weariness they felt. There was an unspoken weight in the air, a heaviness that seemed to sit in each disciple's heart. They had witnessed great things, miracles that defied the natural order, healings that restored life, and teachings that revealed divine wisdom. But even as they marveled at these wonders, their human hearts wrestled with emotions they could not fully understand or express. Jesus, ever perceptive to the hearts of his followers, sensed their inner turmoil. He knew that now was the time to teach them a lesson not about actions, but about what lay beneath the surface, about their emotions. Without understanding or expressing their emotions, even the greatest deeds would lose their meaning. Jesus watched the faces of his disciples, seeing in each of them the unique struggle they faced. John, the beloved disciple, was the first to speak, his voice soft but filled with the weight of his question. "Master," John began, "we have followed you, listened to your words, and witnessed your miracles. But within us, there are feelings that we do not always understand. How should we deal with the emotions that rise in our hearts? Should we hide them away or bring them into the light?" The question hung in the air for a moment, and the other disciples looked at John, their own unspoken questions reflected in his words. Emotions, joy, sorrow, anger, love, were part of their daily lives, yet they had often struggled to understand their purpose. They had been taught to show strength, to control their feelings, but now they wondered if there was more to emotions than simply keeping them in check. Jesus, seeing their inner turmoil, knew that the time had come to speak of the heart's deepest truths. "Emotions," Jesus began, his voice calm and soothing, "are like the wind. You cannot see them, but you can feel them moving through you. They are powerful, carrying you forward like the sails of a boat. But just as you cannot control the wind, you cannot hold back your emotions. They are not meant to be hidden, but to be understood and expressed." His words were simple, yet they resonated deeply within the hearts of his disciples. They listened intently, eager for the wisdom that would follow. Jesus paused for a moment, then continued, "Let me tell you a story. There was once a man who owned a beautiful lamp. It was crafted from the finest gold and adorned with jewels, and the light it gave off was warm and bright, illuminating everything around it. The man loved his lamp, but he feared that others would envy it, that they might try to take it from him. So, instead of letting the lamp shine, he hid it under a basket, keeping it hidden from view." The disciples exchanged glances, puzzled by the story. Why would someone hide such a valuable thing? Thomas, ever practical, spoke up, his voice filled with curiosity. "Lord, why would the man hide his lamp? Would it not be better to let it shine for all to see?" Jesus looked at Thomas with a gentle smile, knowing that the question touched upon a deeper truth. "Fear, Thomas," he replied, "is like a shadow. It grows larger the more you try to avoid it." The man feared that others would judge him or take his lamp away, and so, in his fear, he chose to hide it. But in doing so, he condemned himself to darkness. The light that was meant to guide him remained concealed, and he stumbled through life, lost in the shadows of his own making. The disciples sat in silence, reflecting on Jesus' words. They could feel the weight of the story's message, but it was Peter, always bold, who spoke next. "Lord, I understand the man's fear. I have felt it myself. But more often I feel anger. It rises in me like a flame, and sometimes it burns so hot that I cannot control it. What should I do with my anger?" Jesus turned to Peter, seeing in him the fire of passion and the weight of the struggle he carried. "Anger," Jesus said, "is like fire. It can warm or it can destroy. When you let anger burn out of control, it consumes everything in its path, including your own heart. But when you express it with wisdom, when you allow it to serve the truth, it can be a force for justice and change. Do not hide your anger, Peter, but learn to express it in a way that brings light, not destruction." Peter nodded, his heart stirred by Jesus' words. He had often acted impulsively, letting his anger drive his actions, but now he understood that his emotions were not meant to be hidden or suppressed. They were meant to be expressed with purpose. As Peter reflected on this, Matthew, the former tax collector, spoke next, his voice quiet but filled with pain. "Lord," Matthew began, "I feel shame. People despise me for who I once was, a tax collector, a man who betrayed his own people for wealth. I try to hide my shame, but it weighs heavily on my heart. How can I express something as painful as shame?" Jesus turned to Matthew, his eyes filled with compassion. "Shame," he said, is like a heavy cloak that you wear upon your shoulders. It weighs you down, keeping you from standing tall. But when you share your shame, when you bring it into the light, it is lifted from you. Do not be afraid of your past, Matthew, for it is in expressing your shame that you open yourself to redemption. Your past does not define you, what you do with it now does. Matthew felt a sense of relief wash over him, as if the weight of his shame had begun to lift. He realized that by hiding his feelings he had only kept himself in bondage, but by expressing them he could find freedom. The other disciples, too, were beginning to understand the power of bringing their emotions into the light. James, one of the sons of Zebedee, spoke next, his voice filled with the uncertainty that had been plaguing him. "But what if we fear how others will react?" James asked. "What if they reject us for sharing our true feelings?" Jesus nodded, understanding the fear that gripped James' heart. "The man with the lamp feared the same thing," Jesus said. "He thought that if others saw his light, they might judge him or try to take it away. But in hiding it he lost more than he gained." Fear of rejection is like the basket that covers the lamp. It keeps your light hidden, separating you from others. When you express your emotions, you open the door to connection. Some may reject you, but others will be drawn to your light. Do not let fear keep you in the shadows. James felt the truth of Jesus' words resonate within him. He had often hidden his feelings, afraid of what others might think, but now he saw that by doing so, he had kept himself isolated. Jesus' teaching was beginning to lift the veil from their hearts, helping them to see that emotions were not weaknesses to be hidden, but strengths to be shared. As the disciples pondered these truths, Jesus shared another parable to illustrate the power of emotional expression. "There was once a woman," he said, "who lived in a village that had been struck by famine. She had lost her only son, and her heart was filled with grief. But instead of hiding her sorrow, she went to her neighbors and shared her pain. She spoke openly about her loss, and in doing so, the villagers felt the weight of their own sadness lifted. Her tears became a source of healing for the entire community." The disciples were moved by the story. They had often seen sorrow as something to be borne in silence, but now they understood that sharing grief could bring healing, not only to oneself but to others. Jesus continued, "When you share your emotions, whether they are of joy, sorrow, anger, or fear, you make room for others to share theirs as well. Just as the woman's grief brought healing to her village, your emotions can bring light to those who walk in darkness." The disciples began to open up, sharing their own struggles with emotions they had long kept hidden. Andrew, who was often quiet and introspective, spoke about his feelings of uncertainty. "Lord," he said, "I sometimes feel like I do not belong. My brother Peter is bold and outspoken while I am quieter. Does that mean my emotions are less important?" Jesus looked at Andrew with a kind smile. "Your quietness is a gift, Andrew," he said. "It allows you to listen more deeply and reflect more fully. But do not mistake quietness for weakness. Your emotions are just as important as Peter's. Express them in your own way and others will hear you in the stillness. The world needs both loud voices and quiet hearts." Andrew felt a sense of relief, realizing that his way of expressing emotions was just as valuable as Peter's. He no longer needed to compare himself to others, for his emotions were his own, and they had their place in the world. Philip, who often struggled with doubt, spoke next, his voice filled with confusion. "Master," Philip said, "what if I do not understand my own emotions? Sometimes I feel lost, unsure of what I am feeling inside." Jesus placed a comforting hand on Philip's shoulder. "Emotions can be like the sea," he said, "ever-changing and sometimes overwhelming. But just as you trust a boat to carry you through the waves, so must you trust your heart to navigate through your emotions. In time, as you express them honestly and with love, the confusion will give way to clarity." Philip nodded, feeling reassured by Jesus' words. He had often been overwhelmed by his emotions, unsure of what to do with them, but now he understood that expressing them, even in uncertainty, would lead to greater understanding. Jesus then spoke about the importance of prayer and reflection in understanding emotions. "When you feel overwhelmed by your emotions," he said, "come to the Father in prayer. Speak to him as you would a friend, for he knows your heart better than anyone. In prayer you will find peace and guidance. And take time to reflect. Sit with your emotions, listen to what they are telling you. Do not rush to hide or dismiss them, but allow them to teach you." Jesus then shared several more parables to help the disciples understand different aspects of emotional expression. In the parable of the farmer's joy, he spoke of a farmer who, after years of hard labor, finally saw his fields yield a bountiful harvest. Overcome with joy, the farmer invited his neighbors to celebrate with him. His joy, rather than diminishing, multiplied as it was shared. "Joy is a gift meant to be shared," Jesus explained. When you express your happiness, it spreads like seeds scattered on fertile soil. It grows and bears fruit in the hearts of others. In the parable of the angry servant, Jesus told the story of a servant who became angry with his master but kept his anger hidden. Over time, the anger grew, turning into bitterness and resentment. Eventually, the servant's anger exploded, causing harm to both him and his master. Anger, when hidden, turns to poison, Jesus said. But when expressed in truth, it can lead to understanding and healing. Do not let your anger fester, speak it with love and wisdom, and it will bring light rather than darkness. As the evening wore on, the disciples felt their hearts grow lighter. They had learned that emotions, whether joy, sorrow, anger, or fear, were not burdens to be hidden, but gifts to be shared. Jesus reminded them, "Let your light shine before others, that they may see the goodness in your hearts and glorify your Father in heaven." Your emotions are a part of that light. Do not hide them, for they are a reflection of God's love within you. Under the starlit sky, the disciples sat in quiet reflection, their hearts lightened by the wisdom of their teacher. They now understood that emotional expression was not a sign of weakness, but a way to connect more deeply with themselves, with others, and with God. Through the sharing of their emotions, they could bring light into the world, just as Jesus had brought light into their lives. And with this understanding, they were ready to carry that light forward, to shine in a world that so often walked in darkness. This is end of the story. Please like this video and subscribe my channel for more Jesus story like this. May the God watch over you.